Tonight, we are going somewhere far from the noise of the modern world. We are going to the open Atlantic Ocean. The year is 1872. The water is gray. The wind is cold, and somewhere on the horizon, a ship is drifting. Sails full, hull steady, lanterns still lit, and no one is on board. This is the story of the Mary Celeste. A story that has haunted sailors, historians, and dreamers for over 150 years. A story with no ending, only questions that drift, like the ship itself, endlessly across the sea. Chapter 1. A ship with a dark past. Before we can understand what happened to the Mary Celeste, we need to understand what she was and where she came from. She was born in 1861 on the quiet shores of Spencer's Island, Nova Scotia. Built from locally felled timber, she was a two-masted brigantine, strong, elegant, and built for the open sea. She was originally named the Amazon, and from the very beginning, the Amazon seemed to carry misfortune with her, like cargo she could never offload. Her very first captain, Robert McClellan, fell gravely ill during her maiden voyage and died before the ship ever reached port, a dark beginning for any vessel. In the years that followed, she suffered collision damage in the English Channel. In 1867, she was driven aground in a violent storm off Cape Breton Island, Nova Scotia, leaving her hull badly damaged and her owners eager to be rid of her. She was then sold, and then sold again by her new owners. By 1869, she had changed hands enough times that her new American owner, Richard N., decided a fresh name was in order. The Amazon became the Mary Celeste, a new identity, a new chapter. Some sailors would have called it a clean slate. Others, the superstitious ones, would have said, you cannot wash away what a ship has already seen. Chapter 2. The Captain. By 1872, the Mary Celeste had been purchased by a group of investors, and the man chosen to captain her was Benjamin Spooner Briggs, a man who, by every account, was exactly the kind of person you would want in charge of a ship. Briggs was 37 years old. He was born in Massachusetts, the son of a sea captain, raised in a family where the ocean was simply a fact of life. He was experienced, respected, and deeply religious, a man known for running a quiet, orderly ship. He did not drink. He did not tolerate disorder. He chose his crew with great care. For this voyage, he brought along his wife, Sarah, and their young daughter, 2-year-old Sophia Matilda. His oldest son, Arthur, was left behind with his grandmother in Massachusetts so he could continue his schooling. It was a decision that, in hindsight, carries a weight that is difficult to sit with. Briggs also assembled a crew of 7 experienced sailors, including his first mate, Albert Richardson, a man Briggs trusted implicitly, and 4 German seamen from the Frisian Islands, among them brothers Volkert and Boy Lorenzen. These were not reckless men. They were not desperate men. By every measure, this was a capable, well-provisioned voyage from a respected captain. And yet, Chapter 3, Departure. On November 7th, 1872, the Mary Celeste slipped out of New York Harbor, bound for Genoa, Italy. Her hold carried 1,701 barrels of commercial-grade alcohol, a cargo worth roughly $35,000 at the time, destined to fortify wines in the Italian market. The ship carried 6 months of food and fresh water. Everything was in order. 8 days later, on November 15th, another ship left New York Harbor on a similar course. That ship was the Dei Gratia, a British brigantine captained by David Morehouse. Some accounts suggest that Briggs and Morehouse were acquaintances, that they had even shared a meal together the night before the Mary Celeste departed. Whether that is fact or later embellishment, we cannot say for certain. But the connection between these 2 ships would become one of the most discussed details of the entire mystery. For now, both ships were at sea. The Atlantic stretched out before them, vast, indifferent, and dark. Chapter 4. The Last Log Entry. Picture. The Mary Celeste in the days following her departure. The ship moves through rough Atlantic weather, the kind of weather that any experienced sailor would expect in November. Captain Briggs keeps his log recording position, weather, the condition of the crew, routine entries, the language of a careful man doing his job. The last log entry is dated November 25th, 1872. It places the Mary Celeste approximately 6 nautical miles from the Azores, a volcanic island chain rising out of the mid-Atlantic. The entry notes the weather, the position, nothing unusual, and then nothing. No further entries, no distress signal, no note, no indication whatsoever of what came next. Whatever happened on board the Mary Celeste happened somewhere in the 10 days between November 25th and December 5th. In 10 days, something turned a well-ordered ship into a ghost. Chapter 5. Discovery. December 5th, 1872. The crew of the Dei Gratia, sailing roughly 600 miles west of Portugal, spotted something on the horizon. A ship, under full sail, moving erratically. Captain Morehouse watched through his glass for 2 hours before sending a small boarding party to investigate. The seas were rough. The approach was slow. When his men finally pulled alongside and climbed aboard the Mary Celeste, what they found would be talked about for the rest of history. The ship was empty. Not wrecked, not burning, not sinking. Empty. The cargo of alcohol was largely intact. The food stores were untouched. There was water in the hold, about 3 feet of it, but nothing close to a dangerous level for a ship of this size. The sailors' personal belongings were still in their bunks. Captain Briggs' sword was in his cabin. His wife's sewing materials were still neatly arranged. A child's toys remained undisturbed. The last meal appeared to have been interrupted mid-preparation. One detail stood out above all others. The ship's only lifeboat was gone. Though the navigational instruments, the compass, the chronometer, the sextant, were missing as well. These were not things that washed away in a storm, These were things that people took with them when they intended to go somewhere, 10 people had gotten into a lifeboat in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean and sailed away from a sea-worthy ship. Why? Chapter 6. The investigation when the Dei Gratia brought the Mary Celeste into Gibraltar. The questions multiplied faster than the answers. An Admiralty Court investigation was opened, overseen by a man named Solly Flood, Gibraltar's Attorney General, and a man who seemed determined to find a crime whether the evidence supported one or not. Flood examined the ship carefully, and he believed he found several suspicious marks. He saw what appeared to be cuts along the bow, which he concluded had been made deliberately. He found stains on the ship's rail that he suspected were blood. He found a deep groove in the wood that he thought might have been made by an axe. His conclusion was dramatic. The crew had gotten into the alcohol cargo, descended into chaos, murdered the Briggs family and the officers, and fled. There was only one problem. The alcohol aboard the Mary Celeste was industrial-grade ethanol, denatured, full of additives specifically designed to make it toxic and foul-smelling. It was not something anyone would choose to drink. Additionally, the stains Flood identified as blood were later tested and found to be something else entirely, not blood at all. The theory of a violent mutiny quietly fell apart, but other theories rushed in to fill the void. Chapter 7. The theories over the decades that followed. The Mary Celeste became one of the most theorized mysteries in the world. Some explanations were rational, some were not. There was the piracy theory that another crew had boarded and killed everyone. But pirates would have taken the cargo, and nothing was stolen. This theory does not hold together. There was the conspiracy theory that Briggs and Morehouse had secretly planned the whole thing together, staging an abandonment to collect salvage money. But the two ships had sailed 8 days apart, and there was no evidence of any friendship deep enough to motivate such an elaborate and dangerous scheme. Besides, why would Briggs leave behind his 2-year-old daughter as part of a fraud? There was even in the more colorful chapters of the legend. Talk of sea monsters, waterspouts, and forces that no map can contain. We can leave those where they belong. The theory that has gathered the most serious attention from historians and scientists comes down to something almost painfully ordinary: an explosion of fumes, and a captain who made a very understandable decision in a moment of pure panic. Chapter 8. The most likely answer. In 2006, a chemist at University College London named Dr. Andrea Sella built a replica of the Mary Celeste's cargo hold. He used butane gas to simulate the kind of vapor pressure that 1,701 barrels of alcohol could produce, particularly after a rough Atlantic crossing in which 9 of those barrels were later found to be empty or leaking. He ignited the gas. What happened next was striking. There was a powerful pressure wave, a concussive blast of force, and a flash of flame. But because of the nature of the combustion, it left almost no soot, no scorch marks, no fire damage. It was the kind of explosion that could throw everyone on deck to the ground, blow the hatches open, convince a captain that his entire ship was about to ignite, while leaving behind almost no physical evidence that it had ever happened. The sounding rod, the tool used to measure water depth in the hold, was found lying on deck, outside its normal storage place. This suggests someone had just used it, checking the water level in a hurry. The water pump was also found disassembled, possibly broken, which may have led Briggs to believe the ship was taking on far more water than it actually was. Then there is the navigation question. Some researchers believe Briggs was operating with a faulty chronometer, which would have placed the ship further west than he believed. Modeler central, meaning when he looked for the Azorean coastline that his charts told him should be nearby, he found nothing but open ocean. 3 days of expecting land and seeing none. Put it all together, sudden violent pressure blast from below, a broken pump suggesting a ship taking on water, a captain who cannot find the land his instruments say should be right there. The decision feels less mysterious and more human. Briggs ordered everyone into the lifeboat. He attached it to the ship with a long rope, intending, almost certainly, to wait at a safe distance while the danger passed, and then climb back aboard. And then, somewhere in those cold November waters, the rope broke, or the weather turned, or a wave came that nobody saw in time. The lifeboat was never found. The 10 people aboard were never found. They were not taken by something extraordinary. They were taken by the sea. In the most ordinary of ways, a chain of small errors and bad luck that compounded into something irreversible. A good man making a reasonable decision in a moment when there was no good option. Chapter 9. What became of the ship the Mary Celeste herself went on sailing? After the Gibraltar hearings concluded, she was returned to service under new ownership. Sheets changed hands multiple times over the following years, carrying various cargoes across various seas. The notoriety of her name made her difficult to keep crewed. Sailors are a superstitious people, and no one was eager to serve aboard a ship that had once sailed itself. In 1885, her final captain deliberately ran her aground off the coast of Haiti as part of an insurance fraud scheme. The ship that had once drifted silently for 11 days across the Atlantic was scuttled by the hand of man on a Haitian reef. She broke apart in the shallows. The ocean, which had swallowed her crew 13 years earlier, took her too. In 1884, just 2 years before that end, a young writer named Arthur Conan Doyle published a short story inspired by the case. He changed the ship's name slightly, calling her the Mary Celeste, and invented a story of an escaped enslaved man seeking vengeance. The story was fiction, entirely, explicitly fiction, but it was so well written, and the public was so hungry for an answer that many readers took it as fact. The name Mary Celeste spread widely, and for decades it competed with the real name in public memory. Conan Doyle would go on, a few years later, to create Sherlock Holmes. But it was the Mary Celeste that first showed him he could make the world believe in a mystery. And there is something quietly remarkable in that.